The sky over Dresden simmered with the orange glow of distant fires. Britta Fischer stood on the rooftop of her family's apartment building, watching American bombers drift like dark birds across the February night. At 19, she had grown accustomed to the drone of engines, the wail of sirens, the distant thunder of bombs falling elsewhere. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the planes were coming closer. Her father joined her on the roof, his weary eyes scanning the horizon. "They're heading this way, Britta. We should go to the shelter." "Just another minute," she whispered, transfixed by the deadly ballet above. As the daughter of a professor who had quietly opposed the Nazi regime, Britta understood the complexity of the war better than most. While her neighbors celebrated German victories, the Fischer family had mourned the madness that had engulfed their beloved country. "Now, Britta," her father insisted, taking her arm. "Your mother is waiting." As they descended the stairs, the first bombs fell. 20,000 feet above Dresden, Lieutenant Noah Cooper checked his instruments one last time. The 23-year-old pilot from Pennsylvania had flown 36 missions over Nazi Germany, each one leaving another small scar on his conscience. Tonight's mission troubled him more than most. Intelligence had designated Dresden a military target, but Noah knew it was filled with civilians and refugees. Approaching target, his navigator announced. 2 minutes to drop. Noah nodded, feeling the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. He thought of the faces below, women, children, the elderly, huddled in shelters as death rained down from American and British bombers. He had enlisted after Pearl Harbor, burning with patriotism and a desire for justice. Now, 3 years later, the lines between justice and vengeance had blurred. "Bombs away," called the bombardier. Noah watched the deadly payload fall from his B-17's belly, joining thousands of others descending on the Baroque city below. The firestorm that would follow would be one of the most destructive of the war. He didn't know it yet, but the events of February 13, 1945, would haunt him for the rest of his life. Britta never reached the shelter. A direct hit to their building had collapsed the stairwell, separating her from her parents. Disoriented and half-deaf from the blast, she stumbled through the burning streets, dodging falling debris and desperate civilians. The city was transforming before her eyes. Centuries of architecture and art consumed in flames. The air itself seemed to burn, sucked toward the center of the firestorm in violent gusts that toppled the weak and unwary. "Help!" she cried as another woman fell beside her, but her voice was lost in the cacophony of destruction. The heat seared her lungs, the smoke blinded her. When she stumbled and fell near the Elbe River, Britta knew she could go no further. As consciousness faded, she watched an American bomber, struck by anti-aircraft fire, trailing smoke as it descended. Her last thought was that perhaps they would meet in whatever came after, the bomber and the bombed, equals at last in death. Noah fought the damaged controls, trying to maintain enough altitude to clear the city. Flak had torn through his right engine and punctured the fuel line. 2 of his crew were injured, and the cockpit was filling with smoke. "We need to bail out," his co-pilot shouted over the roar of the failing engines. "Not over the city," Noah replied, wrestling with the yoke. "Too dangerous. I'll take her down by the river." Using every ounce of skill gained in 3 years of combat flying, Noah guided the wounded BR-17 away from the center of Dresden, aiming for the darker area near the Elbe's winding course. The impact was violent, throwing him against his restraints as the bomber skidded along the riverbank before coming to rest, remarkably intact. "Everyone out," he ordered, helping his injured crew from the wreckage. "Move away from the plane. Germans will be here soon." In the chaos of evacuation, Noah spotted a crumpled form near the water's edge, a young woman, unconscious but alive, her face streaked with soot and blood. Without thinking, he scooped her up and carried her away from the bomber, moments before its fuel tanks exploded. The girl stirred in his arms, her blue eyes opening in terror when she realized who held her. "American," she gasped in accented English. "I won't hurt you," Noah assured her, setting her gently on the ground away from the burning wreckage. "You're safe now." The irony of his words wasn't lost on either of them. The Dresden authorities were overwhelmed by the scale of destruction. Noah and his surviving crew members were able to blend in with the refugees streaming from the burning city. In the confusion, Noah made a decision that defied all military protocol and common sense. He wouldn't abandon the injured German girl. Britta had suffered a concussion and burns to her hands and face. More concerning was her cough, evidence of smoke inhalation. Without proper medical care, she might not survive. Noah had basic first aid supplies from the plane's emergency kit, but it wasn't enough. They took shelter in an abandoned boathouse downstream from the city, far enough from the firestorm to breathe but close enough to hear the continuing bombardment as a second wave of bombers arrived. "Why are you helping me?" Britta asked as Noah cleaned a cut on her forehead. "I am your enemy." Noah paused, considering his answer carefully. "I don't think you're my enemy. Hitler is my enemy. Nazism is my enemy." He resumed his ministrations. "Besides, I'm partly responsible for this." "You were following orders," she said, wincing as the antiseptic stung her wound. "That excuse didn't work at Nuremberg for your people," Noah replied. "It won't work for me either." Britta studied the American pilot's face, the weariness in his hazel eyes, the tight set of his jaw, the premature lines etched by war. He was barely older than she was, yet he carried the weight of drop bombs and the lives they had claimed. "My parents," she whispered. "They were in our building when it was hit." Noah's hand stilled. "I'm sorry," he said simply, knowing no words could bridge the chasm between them. "They opposed Hitler," Britta continued. "My father was a professor at the university. He taught ethics." She laughed bitterly. "He always said we must recognize the humanity in everyone, even our enemies." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," she replied, tears cutting clean tracks through the soot on her cheeks. For 3 days, they remained in hiding as Dresden continued to burn. Noah's navigator and flight engineer had disappeared in the chaos, likely captured or killed. His bombardier, wounded in the crash, died the second night despite Noah's desperate attempts to save him. Left alone with Britta, Noah faced a growing dilemma. His duty as an American serviceman was to escape and evade, to make his way to Allied lines. But Britta was too weak to travel and too vulnerable to leave behind. On the 4th day, she developed a fever. Her breathing became labored, and her burns showed signs of infection. "You need to go," she told him through chattering teeth. "The Germans will be searching for survivors. If they find you here." "I'm not leaving you," Noah insisted, placing a cool cloth on her forehead. "Not like this." "Why?" "Because your conscience troubles you." Her voice was sharp with fever and fear. Noah sat back on his heels, regarding her thoughtfully. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "But now?" "I don't know. Something's changed." "Nothing has changed," Britta argued. "You're still an American pilot. I'm still a German civilian. We're still at war. People can change, even when the world doesn't," Noah replied softly. That night, as Britta's fever peaked, Noah held her hand and told her about his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. About his father's hardware store and his mother's garden. About his dog, Rex, who waited faithfully for his return. About the small lake where he'd learned to swim and the library where he'd discovered Hemingway and Steinbeck. In her lucid moments, Britta reciprocated with stories of pre-war Dresden. The opera house where she'd first heard Wagner. The Christmas markets fragrant with gingerbread and glühwein. The art galleries and cafes where intellectuals had gathered before Hitler's rise silenced free thought. By morning, her fever had broken, and something indefinable had formed between them, not quite trust, but a fragile understanding. A week after the bombing, they decided to risk moving. Dresden was a city of ghosts, its baroque splendor reduced to skeletal ruins. Bodies still lay in the streets, and the smell of death hung in the air. Disguised in civilian clothes taken from abandoned homes, Noah and Britta joined the refugees heading west. Their story, should anyone ask, was that they were a married couple from Leipzig who had been visiting family in Dresden when the bombs fell. "We need papers," Britta whispered as they passed a checkpoint where SS officers were randomly checking identifications. Keep walking, Noah murmured. Don't make eye contact. They slipped past without incident, but both knew their luck wouldn't hold indefinitely. Noah needed to reach American lines, and Britta needed proper medical care for her injuries. That evening, sheltering in a farmer's abandoned barn, Britta finally asked the question that had been troubling her. What happens if we reach your people? Will I be a prisoner? Noah looked up from the map he'd been studying. No, he said firmly. You're a civilian, not a combatant. I'll make sure you're treated properly. And then what? I have nothing left in Germany. No family, no home. The unspoken question hung between them. What would happen to them? This strange connection forged in fire and destruction, was it merely a wartime aberration, destined to evaporate in peacetime? One day at a time, Noah said, reaching for her hand. We'll figure it out one day at a time. Their journey west was fraught with danger. Twice they narrowly avoided German patrols. Once, they hid for hours in a root cellar as SS troops searched a village for deserters. Food was scarce, and the February cold bit through their inadequate clothing. Yet in this shared adversity, their bond deepened. Noah learned that Britta had studied music before the war interrupted her education. Britta discovered Noah's talent for drawing, evidenced by the small sketchbook he carried in his flight jacket. You could have been an artist, she remarked, examining a sketch he'd made of a ruined cathedral. My father would have disowned me, Noah chuckled. Cooper men run hardware stores, we don't paint pictures. And after the war? Will you return to hardware? Noah considered the question. I don't know what I'll do after, he admitted. Everything before feels like another lifetime. On a cold, clear night, they took shelter in an abandoned hunting lodge. A storm had forced them off the road, and Britta's cough had returned with alarming intensity. Noah managed to light a small fire in the hearth, careful to shield its light from outside view. As Britta huddled near the flames, Noah noticed how thin she had become. Her once rosy cheeks were hollow, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Yet even in her weakened state, she possessed a quiet dignity that moved him. Tell me something true, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Something true? Noah repeated, puzzled. Yes. Not what you think I want to hear, or what you should say. Something real. Noah studied her face in the firelight, considering her request. I dream about the bombs, he said finally. Not just at night, but during the day too. I see them falling, and I think about who might be below. Children in schoolyards. Old men feeding pigeons. Women hanging laundry. He swallowed hard. I volunteered to fight fascism, not to kill civilians. And yet you did, Britta said, not unkindly. We all have blood on our hands in this war, Noah. Even those who never fired a shot. Your turn, he said. Tell me something true. Britta's eyes reflected the dancing flames. I hated you when I first saw you, she admitted. Not you specifically, but what you represented. The destruction of my home, the death of my parents. I wanted you to suffer as I was suffering. She reached for his hand. I don't hate you anymore. I don't know what I feel, but it isn't hate. Noah's fingers intertwined with hers. That's a start, he whispered. They reached American lines 3 weeks after the bombing. A patrol from the 4th Infantry Division found them crossing a field near the Rhine. Noah identified himself immediately, producing his dog tags that he'd kept hidden during their journey. The soldiers were suspicious of Britta until Noah explained that she had helped him escape after his plane was shot down. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough to ensure she received medical attention rather than interrogation. At the field hospital, they were separated. Noah was debriefed by intelligence officers, who were particularly interested in his observations of German troop movements and civilian morale. Britta was treated for malnourishment and respiratory problems resulting from smoke inhalation. For 3 days, Noah was unable to see her. When he finally gained permission to visit, he found her sitting on the edge of her cot, dressed in borrowed clothes, her hair freshly washed but her eyes distant. "They're sending me to England," he told her without preamble. "My tour is complete. 37 missions." "Congratulations," she said softly. "You survived." "Come with me," Noah urged, sitting beside her. "As a displaced person, you qualify for refugee status. The Red Cross can help with the paperwork." Britta shook her head. "I can't leave Germany, Noah. Not like this. There are other survivors from Dresden, people looking for family members, children who need care. I've been speaking with a Red Cross nurse who says they need interpreters." "Britta, please, listen to me, Noah," she interrupted, taking his hands in hers. "What happened between us, it was extraordinary. You saved my life, and perhaps I saved something in you as well. But we met in a moment outside of normal time. Now reality is returning, and we must face it. So that's it? We go our separate ways as if none of this happened." There was an edge of anger in his voice that surprised them both. "No," she said gently. "We carry it with us. But we don't pretend this is something it can't be." Noah stood and walked to the window, staring out at the military vehicles and bustling personnel. The machinery of war ground on, indifferent to individual hopes and heartbreaks. "Write to me," he said finally, turning back to her. "When you can. Let me know you're safe." Britta nodded, blinking back tears. "I will. And you must write to me, too. Tell me about your hardware store and your dog Rex." Noah smiled despite himself. "I promise." April 1946. Noah stood outside his father's hardware store in Allentown, key in hand, heart pounding. He had been home for 8 months but had avoided the store until now. His father, understanding more than he expressed, had given him time. The interior was dusty but otherwise unchanged. The same tools hung on the walls, the same cash register stood on the counter, the same bell jangled when he opened the door. Noah ran his fingers over familiar surfaces, remembering the boy who had once known exactly where he belonged in the world. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who had dropped bombs on sleeping cities and carried a German girl through burning streets. A man who had killed and saved, destroyed and protected. A man who still startled at loud noises and watched the sky with wary eyes. The bell jangled again. Noah turned, expecting his father, but instead found a woman silhouetted in the doorway. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter, her face fuller, her clothes American. But then she smiled, and he knew. "Britta," he breathed. "Hello, Noah," she replied, stepping into the store. "Your mother said I might find you here." "How?" he began, then stopped, overwhelmed. "The Displaced Persons Act," she explained. "Your letters mentioned your congressman. I wrote to him, explained our connection. He helped expedite my case." Noah crossed the space between them slowly, as if fearing she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "You never said you were applying to come to America." "I wasn't sure it would happen," she admitted. "And I wasn't sure you would still want." Noah didn't let her finish. He drew her into his arms, holding her as he had that night by the Elbe when the world was burning and nothing made sense except the instinct to protect this one life amidst so much death. "Every letter," he murmured into her hair. "I waited for every letter like a drowning man waits for air." Britta pulled back slightly to look into his face. "I'm not the same girl you found in Dresden," she warned. "And you're not the same man who fell from the sky." "I know," Noah acknowledged. "We can't go back. But maybe we can go forward, carrying what we learned there." Outside the hardware store window, Allentown continued its peaceful post-war existence. Children rode bicycles on the sidewalk, housewives examined produce at the market across the street, a mailman delivered letters containing ordinary joys and sorrows. None of them knew what it was to watch a city burn or to find unexpected grace in the midst of humanity's darkest hour. But Noah and Britta knew. And in that knowing was the seed of something that might, with care and courage, grow into a future neither of them could have imagined on that terrible February night above Dresden. "Forward, then," Britta agreed, taking his hand.